Well, for more on today's breaking news, I'm joined by Steve Pruitt, Managing Partner with Watts Partners. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So as we saw, they're looking at the types of goods that were targeted with this second tranche of tariffs from these Section 301 tariffs on $16 billion worth of Chinese goods. What do you think is the Trump administration's strategy here?
To bully. Quite frankly, I think they're trying to force the Chinese government into some, at best, perceptive concessions that allow the administration to check a box and say we won. When you look at this list that they did put out today, there's really not anything on there that surprises anyone. I don't think anyone's surprised. I think it's more mathematical and certainly it's more PR because it happens to distract some of the political discussion from other crazy issues going on in America right now, at least for today. I suspect tomorrow we'll be watching the stock market, looking at the Asian markets earlier. They were starting to drop this morning over fears of the trade war. So the U.S. markets tomorrow will be very interesting to watch.
Because a lot of this information came out after the markets had closed.
Exactly.
Wall Street does seem to have kind of built in some of its responses and isn't really as panicked. But Trump basically saying that the U.S. is winning the trade war was based on Chinese stocks not doing so well and Wall Street continuing to do well. But is that the right way to look at this trade war?
It's certainly not the way I think most people who are engaged in the study of international trade would recommend. Your point about Wall Street building in these factors, they only have so much wiggle room to play with as well. And I think as we get further into this discussion, if there's any real traction around this $200 billion package that's currently being discussed, I think you're going to see Wall Street reacting much more aggressively than we've seen so far. And I think the administration and Congress, quite frankly, with a September deadline here, are really playing Russian roulette, so to speak.
And you certainly have the world's two biggest economies in this tit-for-tat trade war. So if you're one of these countries, one of the many countries involved in intermediate goods, these goods that a lot of countries contribute to, but perhaps they may get exported from China, so
right.
They, on the surface, look like Chinese exports, when in fact a lot of countries are involved. What are trade partners doing about this? How are they shoring up their positions right now?
Well, I think, quite frankly, everybody is hanging on for dear life. A lot of those intermediary players don't have the cushion to play this game very long. And I think one of the things that you could surmise is in the Trump mind at this point is at what point do those players start lobbying the Chinese? Because the pressure is going to build here in the U.S. As more contracts for the farmers are canceled, more industries start rethinking plans about their development of new activities here. Right. That's going to have a significant impact, and I think the elections as well in November are going to really kind of bring all of this home.
Now, looking at China's response, it's essentially been quite measured at the moment and pretty much just only going as far as the U.S., but not going beyond. But what other tools does China have at its disposal in these negotiations?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as measured. I would certainly describe it as strategic or targeted. Secondly, in terms of other tools, I think the biggest tool the Chinese have is their available cash to finance activities in the U.S. As they start to pull back on financing U.S. activities, buying our treasury bonds and other things, it's going to really start to sting.
And just quickly, the one thing that we should be keeping an eye on going forward with all these multiple deadlines, what would you surmise that to be?
I would surmise that this September date that's coming up is going to be pivotal. I wouldn't be surprised if that date doesn't get pushed back. I think there will probably be more discussions through back channel. I think the Chinese and the Americans are talking back channel. At some point, those will start to bear some fruit. But I think the September date is probably the one I would keep an eye on. If it moves, that means some progress is being made.
All
If
right.
if it holds, we're in big trouble.
All right. Thank you so much. Steve Pruitt there, Managing Partner at Watts Partners.